Let's talk next to Major General Pat Akem, who is a security expert, leadership and strategic consultant. He joins us from our Abuja studios. Good morning, General Akem. Thank you for your time. Compliments of the season to you.
Thank you, Larry. Compliments. Thank you so much for inviting me.
In our own discussion, I want us to focus a bit on the strategy here. The Ukrainians are putting up stiff defense, as is expected of anybody defending his or her country. The Russians have pulled back to particular areas, but there are some other areas that they're not giving up. For example, the port city of Mariupol, and they're also occasionally still dealing blows on Kiev itself, which is the capital of the country. Do you, as a military man, do you see a strategy in all of this? Is there a way of looking at this for it to make sense?
Well, you see, this war, even though Putin does not call it war, looks like the case of David and Goliath in the Bible. If you look at the armed forces, the composition, you will discover that Russia is the second largest military force on earth, second only to the United States of America. How does Ukraine rank? Very far down the ladder. For instance, land forces, the army. The Russians have about 900,000. Ukrainians 250,000. So to hold the ground the way they are holding, you will conclude that something has gone wrong. Maybe there was an overestimation of what the Russians were to do. So from a strategic point of view, it will appear that failing to take the capital the way they wanted within 2 days of invasion, to destroy the Ukrainian armed forces, remove the government, install a government that was maybe more conducive to the thinkings and plannings of the Kremlin, it looks as if that has failed, and Russia is trying to play the second card, which perhaps is limited now to the eastern part, where you take the Donbas region, control it, deny Ukraine access to the Black Sea, and then maybe later on, again, move on the capital if the conditions permit. But right now, it looks like the Ukrainian forces are holding their ground. And I must quickly say that, you know, if there is anything that can serve to fortify and push troops to do something the way the Ukrainians are fighting, it's hatred. Hatred that comes as a result of the atrocities that are being alleged to be committed in war, rapes, the feeling of patriotism. So that hatred becomes a treasure, and I think that is what the Ukrainian forces and the citizens are using. So basically, Russia needs to rethink its strategy, and I think they are doing that. They are trying to scale it down and limit their objectives.
Now, you've talked about from the Russian side. I want to take a look at this from the Ukrainian side now. As you said, at the beginning of this conflict, the Ukrainians were definitely the David in the equation, and very few people expected them to come this far with this kind of resistance, particularly against a country like Russia. But they have. They've had support from some of the key countries in the West. The United States, Britain, and the EU have sent them a lot of weapons. They're still asking for a lot more. But if you were the Ukrainian leader and have the situation as you have it on the board now, do you think he is in a good position, or that the country is in a good position now to go for negotiation? Because so many people have said every day that the war goes on, the country gets more and more destroyed. Its infrastructure, its people, and all of that are deeply affected. That where it is now, does it have enough leverage to go for negotiations, given the kind of resistance that it has put up?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think President Zelensky has not hidden his desire to negotiate. The only condition that he red line, no-go area, is perhaps to give away part of his territory. He has consistently maintained that no inch of the territory called Ukraine will be given out. Otherwise, other than that, he's prepared, even up to yesterday, to negotiate. The challenge is Russia needs to go away with something that shows that it has won. When you are the second largest armed force in the world and you come against a small nation like Ukraine with its armed forces, you want to exert a price that saves your face, that shows that you are still a big player. So, yes, Ukraine is prepared to negotiate, but what will Russia accept? Russia wants, at least in the minimum, from what I've read and from what I've observed, in the minimum, to hold the eastern part of Ukraine, create a land bridge, and then deny the Ukrainians access to the Red Sea. And I want to quickly add that what I'm seeing is going to result in a battle of attrition, where the Ukrainians keep fighting and the Russians keep fighting. Now, if this thing goes beyond a year, the question will arise as to whether the international community, America, NATO nations, supporting Ukraine, whether they will keep on sending the resources, because without those resources, Ukraine cannot survive. Would that be possible with the Americans lose interest, especially if Congress changes hands and the Republicans take over? And of course, we've seen from their voting concerning Ukraine, concerning NATO, that they're not too keen about it. I mean, last week, 62 Republicans voted against the motion to strengthen NATO. So if that were to happen, will the Ukrainians still fight? I would say yes, on a scaled down level. The battle of attrition will go on. They will get the Russians bogged down for a long time. So basically, I think Zelensky wants to negotiate. Will Russians accept the conditions that he's giving? It's an open question, but looking at Putin's statements and body language, I think no.
So there's a time schedule to all of this. Apart from all the other considerations, there's a time schedule, and politics will come to play a role in all of this, especially the politics of the supporting countries to Ukraine, and even those who are not supporting Ukraine. It's a function of time. That's what I get from what you've said. But then that moves on. We have heard before that the whole idea is for Russia to get bogged down, and that the Western powers want to, quote and unquote, bleed Russia enough before they support President Zelensky to go back to negotiating when they believe that Russia is sufficiently weakened. In the long run, considering the other people or the other countries that are planning or have now resumed planning to move westwards, the likes of Sweden and Finland, at the end of the day, are we not going to have a sense of deja vu when this keeps repeating itself?
I think that when you stay in power for too long, President Putin has been there for 22 years. It gets to a level where you begin to think you are invincible, that you are some kind of god, that you can do anything. I think he has miscalculated. Ukraine had no chance of joining NATO. They were turned down some years ago, about 10 years ago. You come up with a contrived reason to fight, and you say it's because they are trying to join NATO. But there are other nations, the Baltic nations, Croatia, North Macedonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and a host of others that are within the region and are members of NATO. So you are now increasing the number, because everybody's afraid now if we do not join NATO, Russia has the tendency to invade. I mean, 12 years ago they invaded South Georgia. They've been involved in Syria. So you made nations to become afraid, and they are now moving away. It's been a miscalculation. And I agree with you totally that the idea is to bleed Russia to a point where they can no longer, already they've been demystified. I can tell you with all sense of, tell you that if it were a conventional war between Russia, NATO, those NATO nations will overrun Russia within months. From what I have seen, without conventional, without the use of nuclear weapons. So I think that it has played into the hands of nations that want to withhold down its powers. And if I were advising Putin, you take the best price you can take, cut, and then maybe re-strategize. But the way it is going, of course, maybe he's waiting for NATO to crack. Because if Marine Le Pen wins the election in France, her agenda is different. Viktor Orban of Hungary, his agenda is different. So perhaps to crack NATO apart and then maybe continue to exert the influence, the hegemony he wants to exert within the region. But basically, the other nations want Russia's power and influence whittled down to the barest minimum. And the sanctions are devastating. In about 2 years down the line, the effect of the sanction will become terrible, terribly devastating, and Russia will begin to feel the pinch of its actions.
Indeed, General Akem, we'll bring you back to take a look at this in the near future. But for now, it's just enough for me to say thank you so much for your time on this Easter Monday and wish you the rest of the day to be good. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for the honor. Thank you so much.